And so if I wanted to be really, really careful, I could come in here and I could, you know, if I decided that looked a little bit too bumpy right there, I can always turn my background layer visibility on and see what that is and see if it looks natural enough or if it's a mistake. So let's just turn it off, turn it back on. And you know what? I think it's actually a mistake. What I think it is the shadow from the hill behind it. And I can really only see that whenever I turn these things on and off and toggle them, right? So what I'll do here is I'm gonna, to modify my selection, there's some different ways I can do it. I could, well, the easiest way is I'll go into my, where it says channels, right? And then there's the bottom road selection. That's the one that I have saved up here in where I said select and then I said load or save selection. That's what the bottom road is. But if I want to actually adjust this one that is attached to the layer, that's a layer mask channel. All right, and it's going to be called bottom road mask. So if I turn the little eyeball on, you can kind of see here. So I can modify that mask just by where it's red. I can, while I'm in this mask mode in the channels, I can go over here to, where is it? My paintbrush. It is right there. I can take my paintbrush and I can actually sort of paint pixels. Oops. I need to make sure that the foreground color is black. So if you click this little box right here, then it'll allow me to paint some pixels onto that mask so that I can just sort of like go ahead and sort of fix that up without having to do major other stuff, right? And then if there's anything else I kind of don't like about it, like maybe some of this stuff in here, I could come in here with my paintbrush. And if your paintbrush is too big or too small, you can come up here to brushes and you can adjust the size, the hardness. Right now, I have hardness turned all the way up so it doesn't give me a fuzzy edge. Sometimes a fuzzy edge is a good thing, but right now I don't think it would be. If I turn this mask back off, you can see it kind of dips down here, and I think that's a mistake. So, right? It looks like it's a continuous line right here. I think that that was a bad error on the part of the magnetic lasso. So while I'm in my mask mode, instead of the paintbrush, because I want to erase that, I'm going to take my eraser tool right here. And that brush seems a little bit too big, so I'll turn the size down. And I will just kind of remove it a little bit with my eraser. Oops, and that was too much, so I'm going to hit undo, which is Control or Command Z. All right, and so, and if you find that you're not getting really good controls here, you can also make a selection, like with your selection tool, and then you can use that to constrain your selection. All right, so, or your drawing. And these look pretty even, pretty good. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with that. And then maybe this is problematic. Let's see. Yeah, I think it is. I don't think I need that, so I might want to take my paint tool. And this is what I was saying before, like if you didn't want to just paint this on, if you're afraid that you'd make a mess kind of, then what you could do, all right, is you could take your polygon lasso and you could like just draw a little place that basically is going to constrain what you're allowed to paint and what you're not. And then I could take my paint tool and be as messy as I want and it won't paint outside of that selection, which is pretty cool. Now if I deselect, I'm all good and I can paint wherever I want to paint. Okay, so I think that that selection is going to be pretty good. So I can turn that mask off now, right? I can turn it off and then I can go back into my layers, and as long as I turn this background layer off so I can see where my mask is and how it looks, then we can zoom out and I think it's going to be probably pretty good. All right, and it is. Okay, and so that's a good starting place for the bottom layer of our page. So now I'm going to hit save, which is going to be Control S or Command S. You can also go up here to File Save, and we're going to save it in our images folder or wherever you want as Road Full BG. I'm just going to call it, I'll call it Road PSD, okay, because it's going to have a bunch of stuff in here. So I'll save that, I'll say okay, and we're going to move on. Okay, so the next thing that we decided that we wanted, now that we've got this this road all set up, is that we need to make the rear hills separate behind them. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of this, the last masked layer that we just made. I'm going to duplicate the background, and to duplicate it, there is a little page icon down at the bottom of the layer panel, and I'm going to drag my background to that page icon and drop it on the page icon, and that creates another duplicate layer for me. And I'll double click and I'll call this one rear hills. Okay. All right. And then once again, what I can do is I want to turn off this background layer, toggle it off in visibility so that it's not confusing me later whenever I go to make my selections. And I'm going to blow this up again. And what we could do, if you know, is we could load the other selection. But the thing that I don't really like about, I don't really like about that so much is that if I miss any pixels in here, then it's going to show a weird little gap in between potentially. So what I could do instead of isolating it based off of my old selection that I had made is that I can just make something off the top and then not have to worry so much about what's on the bottom. So let's go down. Let's blow this up again, and we'll use the magnetic lasso once again. So it's up underneath the regular polygon lasso tool. And I'm going to go ahead here and start where I know the top of that hill is. And I'm going to just go reasonably quickly. And I forgot to close my darn layer panel. So here's where if I really wanted to, I could come and I could close this. I'll close my layer panel. In fact, what I could also do is undock these if I wanted more space on my screen, like this. And I might even zoom out just a little bit so I can see a little bit better, right? And then I can move over. And if I hold down my shift key, you see that little plus symbol showing up, and I can start to add to that selection, right? And then I don't have to hold shift down the whole time, but I do need to keep my mouse held down as I'm moving it. So I'm just taking the top edge of the hill. If you go, as I said before, if you go too fast, you might get some pixels that you don't really want. But I seem to be doing all right. Okay. And then I'm just gonna, once again, I'll close this selection. And then I can always go back later for the bottom section, but let's just do it this way. With my shift key held down, I'll start over and add to my selection. Okay, and then here, I'm just gonna go ahead and close it up. And I'm also going to grab these hills in the background over here. Okay, so I'll hold down my shift key and I'll start to add to these, or with these hills. Oops, don't want to dip too far. And then if that happens, like you can also just let up off your mouse and drop an anchor point. Let's just click that. I'm going to clean this up now by using my regular polygon lasso and adding to that selection. And I'm going to go down a little bit lower than I need to, just by, oops, there we go. So we added to that selection. I'm also going to blow this up a little bit because I think, like, see, I'm missing a few pixels here, and that actually could potentially make a little bit of a difference. So we'll take the polygon lasso, hold down shift again to add to the selection. And where's it? Sometimes it's hard to find where I started the path, and if that happens and like you just can't seem to locate it, you can always hit the escape key and start over. So let's, oops, undo. Okay, so I'm gonna hold down shift again, And there we go. So I added those extra little pixels. And then some of these areas, like later, you might see if there's any like remaining little white pixels in here. You might have to do something about it, but it's doubtful it's going to be a problem. And then again, I'll go ahead and I'll take care of the way that this looks at the edge, and I'll add to it. Okay, and then we can go look at the selection edges on the rest of it, and I think it's probably going to be okay, right? So far, so good. Okay, now what I need to do, oh, here I can add to this a little bit, like that. Now what I need to do is think about how this is actually going to look on my web page, and like how the functionality is going to actually be working. And the reason I say this is because if you remember, this bottom hill is going to be on top, literally, of this section that we're highlighting now. So if this rear hill selection sort of dips down lower, then it's really okay. We don't have to be quite as careful with that as we were with the top edge. So I'm just going to basically take my polygon lasso and I'm going to add to that selection by hitting, Shift, and we're going to add. So I can be kind of like crude in how I add to this. It's not a big deal. And there we go. And so it's okay that it dips down lower than where this other hill is going to be covering it up, because it's going to be covering it up. So it's not that big of a deal, right? So I can now come down here and I'm going to add this part of the selection. And you just want to be really careful not to take too much, because if you get too much of it, then it'll be problematic. All right, and so that's probably going to be okay. And before I do anything, I'll just save this. I'll go up here and say select, save selection, and we're going to call this new channel rear hills. Okay, so, and I'm going to save my document, my PSD, right? I'm going to go ahead and save it as road.psd, right? Make sure that I can hit replace. I'm basically just saving over it. All right, not a big deal. All right, so now that I've got that selection made, what I can come in and do is find my layer panel. I'll go up here to window and I'll choose layers again. So it pops up for me. And while that's selected like that, I can go ahead and here, let's collapse this a little bit so it's not in the way. And then I can go and add my layer mask like that. And so that's what is going to be showing up for the mask. And it looks like there might be a little bit of a problem right here where it kind of sticks up a little bit. I don't think that that's what I wanted. So I can do the same thing that I did before, which is in my layer panel, I select the actual mask thumbnail, right? That's important. You have to actually select the mask thumbnail. Then I'll go to my channels and I'll look at rear hills mask and I'll turn the visibility on. And again, with my paintbrush and using the black as foreground, I'll paint in some more of that mask. And I think that that's probably going to be correct. All right. And then if I turn the visibility of that layer mask back off, go over here to layers now, what I can do is make that show up, and I think I'm going to be okay. Right. And then the real test is that if I do this, I turn both of my masked areas on, does the bottom actually look correct? So let's zoom out. Okay, so I've got this mask, which is for the rear hills. And then if I turn on the bottom, which is on top, all right, literally it's physically on top of the rear hills layer, then it looks like it's actually proper. And then while I have those two things on, if I turn on this bottom background layer, the only thing that I should really see change is the sky shows up. Okay, so now I have the foundation of my 3 files that I need to create. Now what I can do is save out some optimized files.